Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube and you see a little Zoom link down below, you can actually join the conversation here. If you are here as an attendee, welcome. Good to have you. You'll see a whole bunch of people here. You're an attendee. If you're not in the panel, you're an attendee. And our job is to talk about the questions. Your job is to ask the questions. And so ask away. You'll see links in the chat to get to Makana. Makana is where we carry on with our conversation. So there's chat and there's also Q&A. And so ask your questions, think about them all day, think about what would make your life better if you just understood about media production or virtual production. If you watch us actually answering these questions and think you could do better, you might be able to, and we'd love to have you. So we have every week we have a couple new people that are jumping into our panel here, and we love to constantly see new people added. So if you're interested, we open the doors at 6. You don't have to come at 6, but we open the doors at 6 and start talking. It's a good time for you to come in, check your mics, see how things are going, have some cup of coffee with us, or tea if that's your choice. And then at 6:40, we'll start doing mic checks. We'll put out the Discord link. The Discord link is where over 800 of us keep talking about this between all of these sessions. And then we'll do a mic check. And the mic check is really when we close the panel. It's when we've decided that this is our group for today. And so you need to be here by 6:40 to actually be in the panel. And then at 7 o'clock, we'll start the general conversation. So general questions start at 7. And really the speed at which we go through those questions is really related to your questions, how often how many you've asked, what you voted up, and so on and so forth. So we go a little slower when there's not a lot of questions, and a little faster when there's a lot of questions. So ask those questions and vote them up often. And the second hour, we talk about something specific. Today, we're going to talk about something. We're going to start doing Fridays as a, and the kind of backup. Mondays are kind of a wild card. We do all kinds of different things on Mondays. Tuesdays are audio. Wednesdays are video and cameras. Thursdays are artists. And Friday is events. Saturday is education. So the second hour, we're going to talk a little bit about what happens in the last couple hours before a show and how to think about that, because it's a critical point in time for a show to be successful. And I think a lot of people don't actually get their head around it. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that approach in the second hour of this hour. But right now, we're going to be going into general Q&A. If you want to share this with anyone else, and don't use your own link, I'll put there's a direct link to Zoom, but you want to use that link, not your link, or more people will come in as you, which maybe is good, but we'd prefer to have everybody come in as themselves. So anyway, and now we're going to jump into the questions. Bill, are you able to run the questions today?
All set for it. Okay. Our first one comes from Philip Tesoro out of Brisbane, Australia. He has a question for Leland specifically. You mentioned VBAN. I have VM Potato on my vMix machine and have been curious about making use of VBAN. What is the best resource to learn how to use that?
I just basically Googled a few videos out there, but it's not as in-depth as I thought it was.
Can you explain what it is?
Yeah, I can actually show a couple people. Let me just grab a desktop share real quick if you don't mind, or I'll put it in mine here. This will be easier if I do it this way. I just got really deep into it the other day because this is something new for me as well, but I've got a good friend who's been using VBAN for quite a while to move audio throughout his intranet. So basically it allows you to use installations of Voicemeeter on several different machines. VBAN is part of the Voicemeeter setup. So we're going to show you what that looks like. This is 2 mixers at once on one of my displays. The one at the bottom is Voicemeeter Potato, the one at the top.
Hey, sorry, real quick, I realized I'm not host yet. I thought I was cutting.
Oh, excuse me.
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine, Mickey.
There we go. Sorry about that.
So the little button for VBAN is located up here in the corner. And what this allows you to do is route the audio channels, which if you look at Voicemeeter Potato for what it is, we have 5 physical inputs, we have 3 virtual inputs, and then we have 5 output channels, which are the A1 through A5. Now, if you bring up VBAN, you basically assign a bus out for the outgoing streams to go to an IP number of another Voicemeeter installation. And then from there, you can also receive incoming streams from that same Voicemeeter installation on the other machine. You just need to make sure that any titles you add to the input devices are exact because it is a verbatim input. It's case sensitive as well, so you have to make sure these all match everything on the other machine. And then once you're connected properly, you'll see the green light come on the other system. So if you're not connected properly, this light will go out. It won't be available, or you may have an error code, a red light over here on the error bar. So just watch for that. And then basically you're going to set your destination of the first voice meter output to a destination on the other voice meter input. So you basically tell it whether you want to send your desktop audio from one device to the virtual input in one, which is that same desktop virtual in on the other device. Or you could reassign it so that when you set A1 to a different bus, it would put that audio onto a different bus, which is what I'm actually doing here today to get to you. You can see the audio going through voice meter potato as my microphone on the left in the lower corner. That's being pumped through the B
Now,
port,
one thing,
the
no,
bus going out. Go ahead, Dallas.
the one question I have for you is so we're hearing a little bit of breakup in your audio that doesn't sound like Zoom. Do you ever have any issues with this as far as this routing goes of audio kind of losing a couple packets?
And that's something I'm just starting to test. It's a possibility you're just hearing some software artifacts. So it's going to be something I'm going to be recording in different channels to see exactly what's happened.
Yeah.
I've had problems with NDI more so than voice meter, but when you combine the two, I think it's the two in unison that can be a problem.
Because
So
it's something that's, it definitely sounds
rates.
like something that's very specific. It's not a Zoom breakup. It's some kind of different software breakup. Phil?
So is
I
this
can't hear that 'cause,
basically
could you record that for me? That'd be great.
is this basically an audio
On YouTube.
hijack for PC but works over a network, right? It's kind of a routing, a patch bay, kind of a.
In a sense, yes. You're basically creating an output device that's a
Right.
default for Windows, which is voice meter, and then you control all your inputs and outputs through it rather than
Through
the
it.
Windows interface.
Yeah, it's a routing.
It's much
So
easier to do.
and can you also add like effects like waves kind of effects?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I could go ahead and add any kind of reverb special effects on this mic on it too. So if I wanted to crank some effects here, or
But
if
like
I wanted to even
plugins,
modulate my voice.
Are there
Oh,
plugins?
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
All the plugins that you wanted
Okay.
to incorporate, any VOAI plugins can be used with VBAN and voice meter in general. I haven't used any plugins with it because I don't play around with plugins a lot, so it's not something I spend a lot of time in. But I'm just getting to know this software. So I've been playing with voice meter potato since it came out. But the VBAN is something that a good friend of ours at Louisiana State University has been using throughout his entire setup for years. And I just never understood how he was doing it. Now I dug in deep the other day and said, wow, this is really convenient. So it just has to be installed across the board. And you will have to use the audio cable as well to route any return videos, because this on its own can cause a lot of mixed minus issues if you don't know what you're doing. So don't go in there and just start plinking away and opening channels and thinking that you're not going to get crossover audio if you don't do it right. You will have to make sure you're mic mixing. So
Thanks, Leland. That was great. That was a great overview. I voice. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Voice meter potato. I'm sure it's a great app. I just think that the name. It's like the pink mustache for Lyft. I think it cost them $1 billion. So anyway, I just can't get over the name. I can't tell a client that I couldn't get voice meter potato to work. They'll be like, it's a potato. Right. Anyway, that's what you think about. I've talked about this before. That one of the key rules with production is don't be weird. So weird names for stuff. We end up with that. But there's certain software that I just go, ooh, I don't know if I can do that. Just mostly because I have to explain it to somebody someday. Next question.
Sure. Or Greg Gibson from Washington, D.C. is in with lots of talk about Zoom lately, but curious if anybody has been using a recently released NDI access in Microsoft Teams and how that might compare to Zoom screen captures for virtual events and presenter.
Has anyone been using Teams? It's an odd thing. Like, I just don't see it anywhere. Like, I'm sure maybe it's just that I don't interact with any companies that use it, but I just don't, I don't see it. Like, it doesn't, no one's asking me for it. Go ahead.
I'm not using it, but I know they've done a lot of updates this last few days, and I've did about 7 or 8 new features. And that's the problem. I won't use it because it keeps changing every 5 minutes.
Well, that's why we dropped Skype, is because every 2 weeks I knew that Skype would be broken, and it wasn't that they were changing it and I was excited. Like with Zoom, usually there's something comes out, and I know there's going to be at least one or two features that are like killer features that I needed. You know, there's a bunch of other stuff that's there, but I know that there's going to be one or two things that are amazing. And with Skype, I didn't have that. There was going to be one or two things that broke my pipeline. You know, and every 2 weeks I knew it was going to happen. And so I think that was probably the right direction to go, is to have it actually work better. Go ahead, Sky, and then John.
Well, it has been a little while since I've used Teams, but I actually worked with the Teams team on Teams. And again, to remember that it is a work in progress, and it's a suite of products that's doing a lot of things to keep people connected, not just the video conferencing. So that's my 2 cents from 12 miles away from Redmond.
John?
It's probably been 3 or 4 days since I said the Zoom user group conference or user conference is coming up, Zoomtopia, on the 14th and 15th. So sign up, it's free.
There you go. Very good. Jeffrey?
I think the biggest problem still with Teams is they throw that watermark on there. And so if you don't care about that watermark, then Teams might be something to use. But with Zoom, it's you have to avoid all the dirty screen, all the overlays that they put on to capture it. And of course, you got to screen scrape that.
The only one that we've gotten around almost everything. The only one that we've noticed in the newest version is somehow people are able to override the chat function. Like we were able to get rid of it and then they put it back in. I mean, so the problem is that when you're screen scraping, that chat pops up at the bottom. So what we do is we open the chat and move it to another window. Like, okay, we're going to move you over here so that we don't see any more chats. I think a feature that we'd love to have is just never display the chat. Like, don't turn it off for everyone, but as a user feature, what I want is just turn that off for me. You know, I don't want to see the little bubbles popping up at the bottom. I just want you just to ignore it. But we're so close.
I know we got rid of that somehow, Alex, because when we did the weddings with Phil, we got that to go away, and I can't remember.
Well, if we open the window and move it somewhere, move it to a second window, then it's fine. It's if it
I didn't do that,
yeah, that's what we have to do, is we just open the window and move it off. But what we'd love to do is hit a lock or something, or click on it, have it something hidden in the. It doesn't have to be something that's obvious, just hidden in the preferences of checkbox of don't show chat. You know, and then I can not have to deal with that anymore. But that and the little connection doctor thing in the corner that means nothing to us because it's never accurate. So we have the only graphic left on Zoom is the one thing that we ignore because it's just never right. And so why bother putting it up there all the time when we're not going to look at it? Anyway, but overall, I think that to get back to Teams, and I mean, we're still using hardware for it. And I know that there's rumors that Zoom's going to support NDI, and we don't care because I don't like NDI. So so I like NDI in the cloud, but when I'm in on-prem, I just want to use baseband or 2110. And so anyway, and NDI is kind of that was that thing that got us in between baseband and 2110. Every new facility is 2110. You know, like we're talking to a bunch of folks that are building them, and that's the future, and it just took a little while to come around the corner. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
One more quick tip for Zoom is the host can actually change names if you have it set up right. You can change all the names on the screens, so at least that lower third disappears. The only problem is if you don't know their name, all you see is a dash.
And we'd love to get rid of that too. Anyway, so I think Zoom just needs a broadcast czar internally that just works on how to do broadcasts, like how to integrate so that it's great. Anyway, next question.
Well, I think I took Greg Gibson's question from Washington, D.C. and accidentally got it into Never Land. So, Greg, if you're out there and listening, would you please repost
Here,
and I'll bring it up?
No, I think that was the one about NDI and Microsoft, right?
No, it's about Zoom. Lots of talk about Zoom lately. It's in...
Yeah, but he was curious about Microsoft Teams. That's the one you just asked. You did accidentally delete it, though, so it didn't go into the right place. Anyway, we're working on that. There's the remove button in our back end interface is sitting in the wrong place. We're working on that. Okay. Anyway, go ahead.
Peter Collins then from Vail, Arizona. Opinions about the AVerMedia live streamer webcam, PW313. Local Costco has a fresh supply under $60.
Has anyone used it? I will say that my track record with every one other than Logitech has not been great. I don't think anyone's turned that corner yet. I haven't tried this one yet, but I just, the sensors, sharpness, all those bits and pieces. I just haven't seen it be any better. So I don't want to be too negative about it because we haven't tested it, but we did just test is it the Razor? It's got a light built into it, like a little ring light based, with a camera. I think it's called a Razor, a Razor or whatever. We bought one of those and we tested it yesterday and it was not great. So what you want to look at here is just, it's great that it looks pretty, but what we're looking for is sensor size, sensor quality, the ability to control it. Those are the kind of things that we kind of want to see. And maybe no one else, maybe we're the only ones that care, but so far we haven't found anything that's competitive with the Logitech line right now. That's in the same price range or under $200. What do you got there, Guy?
Huddle cam.
So, okay, here's the thing with the Huddle cam. It's really heavy. So it's, compared to the Brio, it's really heavy. And that's the thing. So when I put it on my laptop, it swings back like a regular laptop head thing can't hold on to it without it swinging. The Huddle cam. Now, what's the price on the Huddle cam? Is it $399? $299? Whoop, you're muted, Guy.
HDMI and into a mixer, the picture improves greatly. So
yeah,
for those of you that just need to use it as USB, it's a great camera and you got that far end control. But the nice thing is being able to use it as an actual camera into a switcher. So if I was to buy a new webcam, I'd be looking at these.
So, and what's the price on that?
$299.
Yeah, so it's a little bit more expensive. The HDMI is really interesting to me. Now if you plug it in with, yeah, exactly.
And you get the remote, so you can have the presets, and then you can just say, go to this shot, this shot, this shot, this shot, all with the remote. So the Brio doesn't come with a remote, which is a cool feature.
Well, and again, that's actually the one thing that I'm trying to put together in my copious free time is a test with the Huddle cam where it's like an overhead camera. So I think the Huddle cam could be like the perfect overhead camera where you have it because of that easy control of setting it up. You're a teacher, and I know that I'm going to be here, then here, then here, then here, then here. Or you're a teacher or showing something off, knowing what those zoom settings and position are is really useful. So I think the Huddle cam, to your point, I was saying under $200, but I think if you go up to $300, I think the Huddle cam is definitely worth looking at. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, the Huddle cam, I've had a little experience with it, and you can spend all day long setting it up. The settings are very intricate, very diverse. I'm sure, Guy, have you gotten a magic formula for the settings yet?
Yeah, but your lighting is what matters the most with a lot of these web cameras because the sensor's so small that you really got to light it. Otherwise, the gain's going to creep up. And so any of these webcams is going to look really noisy. So the key is just getting some kind of lighting.
Roger on the lighting.
Right. By the way, I have some homework I just want to announce for everybody for tomorrow. Tomorrow we're talking about education. You have to see Tiny World on Apple TV, Apple TV Plus. It is, I've tweeted a couple times now. I'm just kind of befuddled by the level of production. Like it is like Apple went, well, Plimsoll, is it Plimsoll? Anyway, they do all the Nat Geo stuff. We actually worked with them in the past. And so I'm familiar with the company that they hired to do it. And I'm pretty sure that Apple just came to them and said, what would you do if we gave you all the money? And they were like, all the money? And they were like, yeah, all the money. What if we gave you all the money? And they were like, oh, let me show you. And then they showed us. Like it is, I don't know how they have a little behind the scenes of it, but I don't think they showed the real money shots in the behind the scenes. There's a behind the scenes on YouTube. There's but I'm not talking about whether you're interested in nature photography or not. You just have to see it to believe it. Like my kids are just stunned. Like they're like, how are they shooting that? Now I have a growing suspicion that some of the shots are CG. Like literally that's how far they've gone with this nature thing, where there's a couple shots that literally I cannot figure out how they would shoot if they didn't animate it. And they're simple enough from a movement perspective and a quality perspective that they could be animated. But I don't see how they do it otherwise, And so, but some of the stuff that I thought might be CG turned out, they showed behind the scenes of them filming it. And I was like, okay, and so, the most amazing production, that that I've ever seen in a nature photography. And the reason I want to bring it up is that when I talk about the future of like, if we really wanted to turn education on its ear, you start building content about everything at that level. Like because my kids said, I was talking to my kids about it. Would you watch stuff about that was all at this level? They'd be like, I would never leave school. Like if they could just sit there and just binge on educational material at that level. And so we just want to you still need you still need teachers, you still need discussions, you still need all those things, but taking the things that we're just trying to learn, like general things, whether it's physics or math or whatever, and getting them to that level of production would change everything. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, wasn't that the early days of Disney also? And didn't
it was, but now we're there. Like now we have the tools to do it. Like it's the early days, but the key is now we're, that was all facsimile of never as good as what was in the room, but that is, just stunning. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I put a link in the show notes from Apple Insider. Yeah. They actually have a how
it's just a link to done, YouTube. Right? There's a link to a YouTube in Apple Insider.
Yeah, it's a link to a YouTube. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Next question.
Alan McPherson from Georgina is in here with looking for recommendations for cross-platform VPN Remote Desktop solutions to assist non-technical participants when doing pre-event tech checks.
If you're talking about Zoom has its own tools for that. So there is a, funny, I didn't even know it existed, or I didn't really think about it because I had it checked off. And my wife, all she does is Zoom calls. I mean, Zoom events in meetings, was like, oh, you just use the Zoom support, and Jesse also suggested it to me. Like, he's like, oh, just use Zoom support. I think Jesse, you use Zoom support a lot, right?
Yeah, totally. The caveat there is that if you have remote support, it's called remote one-on-one turned on, then you can't have breakout rooms turned on for that account. So one or the other, super handy though. Yeah, thanks.
When we're prepping participants, so it doesn't work as far to Jesse's point. When we're prepping participants, we use it. But then you bring them into a meeting that has breakout rooms. So we deal with when I do it on our end now, we're doing it. We do it in a meeting where I have access to that, but it's not the end meeting that we're using for the thing. So it's a different challenge than Jesse has, but it's really good for that. That's the easiest one because it's on Zoom and you can just open it up. Go ahead, Leland.
Just a few. I'll mention the names of them: TeamViewer, Google Remote Desktop, Splashtop, AnyDesk, and I'm using Parsec right now, which is running my Zoom box. So that's a really simple click one button type system. It's used mostly for gaming shares, and it does have like a gaming library attached to it, but you can just do two little buttons on your screen. You'll see connect to this machine, connect to that machine. It's a simple file download on each end and you're good to go.
And TeamViewer is the most common one that we use. I mean, it's just everybody
expensive.
Most people, if you pay for it, but you can do a real quick like, hey, just send me a thing and put it out there. But it's TeamViewer is a pretty popular one and relatively easy to use. Someone just sends you back a link and you pop it in, or a code and you pop it in. Go ahead, Beju.
Yeah, TeamViewer and AnyDesk seem to be the ones that seem to get through most firewalls as well. So even if you have double NATs or even triple NATs, they seem to work. Parsec is more sensitive to double NATs, especially that. So if you are on a corporate network behind the firewall, it doesn't work sometimes. So it's really fast. It's really efficient. I use that on my cloud PCs for remote control and it works really well. You can literally edit.
Can you explain double and triple? Can you explain what you were talking about there?
Yeah. Basically, like if you have a router which is giving out an IP address and you have a second router in front of it, like if your ISP is giving you a router which is giving you like a local LAN address, and then you have a second router or firewall in front of it, it's basically a double NAT. Some ISPs are putting their own NATs in front of that as well because they don't have enough IPv4 public addresses available. So it tends to get really painful at times. Yep. That's one of the biggest issues we have here. So absolutely. It's there. Yeah. But TeamViewer and AnyDesk. And one point, TeamViewer has gotten cheaper now. They used to be really expensive now, but their licenses have actually gotten more affordable. So you can actually buy them, get the commercial license pretty reasonably now.
That's great. Next question.
Paul Wallace in the panel and out of Austin, Texas says, a friend of mine is looking for a robust community gathering place and is looking at Discord and others. She's concerned about Discord privacy. What do you say about privacy and what are her options?
My number one thing to say about privacy is if you're doing this online, the only thing to really use online for privacy is Signal. Outside of that, there's nothing. Like just see, like if we're talking about real privacy, I just want to make sure that, signal is as close as you can get, and you put it on, 1 day expiring, and it's just this motion of stuff and everything else. But outside of that, like on any online one, I think that the danger that people have is that they assume somehow that the security is X when it's not anywhere near that. Anybody who wants to get in can get in, and so we just want to make sure that we're all, before we say anything else, we just want to make sure that doing anything online is not safe. Like, you just need to get that it's not, and then inside of that, just communicate responsibly, knowing that you're not going to be able to hide it. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Paul.
Discord has some really interesting features, though, that allow you to really manage what people are seeing and what they're going to do. Like, for instance, if a troll comes in, they're not going to read through the rules. And in one of the rules, you should have, might have a little link at the bottom saying, yeah, I accept these rules. And when you click on it, all of a sudden the board just opens up to a whole bunch of new categories. So you have that, and you also have the moderator control, which don't let you, and you can become a participant until somebody accepts you, like with office hours, and then you can start working.
Right, absolutely, Paul.
Okay, so River Deliano, I hope I'm saying her name right, wants to start this community, and she's looking at a bunch of things. There's like 50 people chiming in on this Facebook thread, and she wants to know, is that the way to go? If you were doing this over again, Alex, would you use Discord, or what would you look at? What would be the choices here?
We looked at everything. I mean, I didn't look at all of it. Stephen Kimbrough looked at it, and Phil was looking at it, and a couple other folks were, like, thinking about it. And I came up with Discord on my own, just looking at stuff. Like, I think Discord is going to be the one, but I waited for them to confirm my suspicion, and so, because they were looking at it a lot harder, and they're smarter about these things than I am. And I have found Discord to be pretty awesome. It's not perfect, but I think that there are, I don't think that there's I think that we're riding the best collection of tools at the moment. I think that our Q&A works pretty well. I think that Discord works pretty well. I think Zoom works pretty well. And I think that we kind of have best of market across the board at the moment for what we're doing. Is it perfect or complete? Absolutely not. But I think
what would be your second pick? What would be your second choice? Slack?
It costs money.
Yep.
But Slack, Slack has a lot of the tools. I mean, Discord is the free version of Slack, but Discord has so many other tools that Slack doesn't have. I think, but I don't think that, especially if you have any sense of security. I mean, Slack's going to be more secure than Discord. It's just built for corporations, so it's going to be tighter, but more secure doesn't mean secure. Like, we just need to make sure we never say that, ever. Is that it's secure. Go ahead, Leland.
I guess when I hear a comment like that, is you want to build a community, my first question is, what kind of community do you want to build? Because Discord is tailored to a very verbal community in a sense, but they're all so verbose. So there's a lot of typing going on. But then again, to throw in the hat on Discord, it has a full video conferencing platform built into it as well. So if you want to make calls with 4, 6, 8, what is it, up to like 10 people now, I think, on Discord, something like that, you're able to just get in on a call just like you can here on Zoom as well. So it has that feature built in that many others don't. Yeah,
the Discord, I think the video doesn't work with my system on Discord, so like, I can't see half of my stuff. No, it's because it's just using a much more raw version of WebRTC than what Zoom's doing. So it can be a little bit funkier, but I would still pick what we're doing right now. I do think that our Discord would not work without Zoom. If we weren't doing this every day, the Discord would immediately die off. And this experience is much richer because we have Discord. There's so much organization and continued conversations and everything else. It's not one medium or the other. It's this, and what we haven't added yet is more stuff on YouTube where we're posting videos and things to think about and everything else. So that, and then a web page that we culminate a lot of this. So there's still other aspects of this that we'll be working on for the rest of the year. But I think that it's not one or the other. It's a mixture of all of them. I think that that's the thing that we want to look at, is how do you integrate all of these bits and pieces together. Jeffrey, real quick, and then we'll move on.
One last thing to think about with Discord is it is open source, which means that you can get people to make third-party plugins, and just like with OBS, it's all community entered. So that enters into security right there.
I also would recommend, I'm on about 5 or 6 different Discords. I know some people are on lots more, but I try to, I don't want it bouncing all the time, but I do like to look at other people's Discords because it gives me ideas about, it's really interesting how they've done what they've done, whether the classes that they're using or how they break it up. It's interesting. Now, next question.
James Babbitt says, Alex, in the kit you're sending out now, what's the alternative to the Otto earphone?
I mean, a lot of people have talked about cheaper ones. There's a lot of less expensive ones. The ones that, if we're not getting Ottos, we go the other direction. So we go to audio implements. The audio implements are what we use for. That's what I'm wearing right now. I don't know if I have one just sitting out, but it's a slightly different one. I won't be able to hear you for a second as I pull this out, but this is the one that I use, and this is what the whole industry uses. like this is like if you have these, if I just have the bottom end of these, most broadcasters will have the top end. So this is what you see everywhere. Anyway, so that's that's what we use here. The amplifier on this one is much better than the Otto, but it's more expensive. It's probably $130 a unit for all the pieces. You buy them all separately. So you buy like, I want this kind of earpiece with this kind of amp with this kind of cord. Just don't get the one like the old. Don't get the spiral one like the old telephones. It's all knotted up, just like our old telephones. Anyway, so but outside of that, I always have a stereo and a mono version of the cable so that I can go. I can switch it out. Some things don't like to support one or the other, so I keep those. But that's the other alternative for me. Does anyone else have anything else? I mean, I don't really know about the less expensive ones. The Otto ones, I think their quality has dropped pretty significantly over the last couple of years. I think they're just trying to make more of them or something. But the amplifier is, sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not. But I grabbed an old one and it worked great, and then I bought a new one, did not. so I think it's something they've changed in what they're doing. Guy, what do you have there?
Announced yesterday is the new Sidekick 2 from Bumblebee, worth looking at. I think Mickey's using the
This is going way up. This is going.
It is. It is. There was no budget in there, right? I did see something that said.
Yes.
Limited.
No. This is the. I don't have a budget. I mean, this is the almost to the top. The highest one would be like an ultimate. Like a in-ear.
I'll put away my
ultimate ear.
toys. Go.
No.
Back
Show
to
it.
my toy box.
So what's changed in the new version?
Thinner wire. 44% thinner wire. 33% lower profile cable relief, and then better sound.
I was looking for I think I have it down at my other in my office. The other one that I have is the Ear Heroes, which are really thin wires, and that's what they use in a lot. Secret Service uses those. I know because I asked them when I was working with them. So, but they super thin wires, on the ultimate. I think that I'm going to guess that the Bumblebees are actually sound better than the Ear Heroes. I don't know if anyone's done a ear to ear comparison, but I'm going to guess that the Bumblebees are better.
John Hiddleston, I think.
John, go ahead, John.
Yeah, the Bumblebee, which is also the N-ear, and the N-ear had the smaller cable already. So there's a difference between the Bumblebee and the N-ear, and I think the Bumblebee just has the newer wires that the N-ear.
And how much is the Bumblebee again?
Guy, do you know?
I believe it's $299.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that's the Cadillac version that I definitely want to get. I just haven't justified them yet because I have so many in-ears. I have so many in-ears that like my wife would be like, "Why are you doing that? You have like 6 of them." And I would have to explain to her because I don't have one of them.
So the transducers in them are used in hearing aids, so they're really well engineered, and you could wear them for days without any problem. And they have a very good earwax control, which there are problems with other people. So I'm sold.
Yeah. That's great. Hosmuk and then Bill and then Mickey.
Yeah, at the beginning of office hours, I was a real rookie. So somebody recommended in here, and I think Mickey mentioned it somewhere about Sidekick. So I ordered it. I never look at prices, and when I got it, I got such a fright. But anyway, I'm very happy with it. Sits very comfortably, and the sound is excellent. And it comes with different earpieces, so you can adjust how much extraneous sound you want to hear.
That's great. That's great. You got Bill and then Mickey.
I also switched to the N-ear, and what I did it for, just for those of you who are concerned about anything building up in your ear, particularly, I had a little problem with itching and stuff like that. And it's just because I was spending hours and hours monitoring in the voice booth with an old style foam earplug. And I just don't think that's good for ear health. So the new one, what Guy was showing, and these higher end ones have moved to a much smaller little cone shaped diaphragm, and they let your ear breathe a lot more. So I think they're actually healthier. That's my 2 cents.
Mickey?
Yeah, in terms of going low profile without, like, the bumblebees are the lowest profile you can get without stepping into the price range and massive headache of phonak.
I will say that I had a phonak. I had a personal phonak for a long time when I was doing training, and it was awesome. It was just awesome to have the little bead that you just put in your ear, and it was in my office, and so I could just walk around, and I had a wireless mic and everything else, and I missed that. It was nice.
But yeah,
No wires.
programming eight of them on a production, not
No,
fun.
that's not fun. No, I've been there. I've only had to program 4, and it was not great. And we'll move on. Next, how many times do you get that much of a question answer to your in-ear monitors? Anyway, all right. Next question.
I will say they're not as good for music too, so that's a speech thing mostly. All right, moving on to Bill Narrows is in from Aiken, South Carolina, with need recommendations for a 4K HDMI 4x4 matrix switcher to share 3 to 4 monitors between 2 computers. Think affordable office use, not high-end production use.
Silence.
Tough call. HDMI switchers can get in the way when you're doing streaming with 2 different boxes because of copyright issues. Some capture cards look at HDMI switchers as a means to circumvent the copyright protection and won't allow you to capture video on the device unless you remove the HDCP processing that takes place for the high definition copyright protection. So take a look at how you're setting up your system. I did something similar with a simple 3-port HDMI switch. I ran my single center monitor. So I have a 32 and 224s. I ran the single monitor through that I could switch between 2 machines. When I do that, it bounces monitors around. It makes it difficult to keep in line with where your monitors are if you're not careful. But it also caused a copyright issue. So I wasn't able to run my port of Zoom into my other box into the AVerMedia capture card I intended to. So watch for the card, make sure it doesn't have the HDCP copyright protection, and then make sure you route your video cables properly.
The only one that I've used recently is the Monoprice Blackbird, which worked fine, didn't break. so I don't have any bad things to say about it. It did everything I expected it to, and it's not that expensive. I think it's like $150 or something. Beiju?
Yeah, at this end, you need to do a little bit of testing. Amazon has a few, I think, by JTech and GoFranco, which are pretty decent. I use some of their Cat6 extenders and a couple of the smaller matrices. They are pretty decent, but you need to try them. So that's where Amazon's return policy is handy.
Yeah, we've gotten pretty ninja about that, where we just order stuff from Amazon. We just order a whole bunch of them. We just the main thing is when they come in, that's test day, and we go through and test them all, and then we put them all in a box and send them back. And we order so much from Amazon. I don't think that they care, but it's but we've had to figure that out, because otherwise you just can't. There's no store to go to, to find them. Next question.
Well, Garrick, out of the panel here in Columbia, Missouri, and I'm not going to attempt your last name, so I'm going to get it wrong. It's probably either Parmalee or Permel, and I'm not going to mess it up for you. I have a couple of NanLite MixPanel 150s hanging from a grid. I'd like to control the color settings with DMX, I believe. Where should I start?
Anyone want to jump into DMX control? I mean, do you have any controller right now, Garrick?
Yeah, I've got a remote that controls the brightness and the color temperature of the light, but I would like to control the RGB values that those NanLights have. So I'm just trying to figure out, one, do I need to wire DMX down to a box of some sort, or can it be over Wi-Fi? I'm just looking for a place to start my research.
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Oh, yeah, I'm not the expert, but yeah, there's definitely Wi-Fi options, and hardwired is always the recommendation. But and there's software. So there's software that talks to little boxes that are just dongles, basically, rather than dedicated DMX hardware.
Yeah, and you just need some kind of interface. So, there's a variety of ones that are going to interface into DMX and then use wireless to go to your iPad or Android. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I would say go straight to NanLite and ask them those questions to begin with, because DMX standards can change throughout different situations, different types of lights. And you might be able to use one system, but won't be able to use another system. Another thing is there is a USB to DMX dongle that can plug into your computer. And of course, you can use multitudes of softwares from many different companies. There are some free, they don't work as well. And you got some really high-end stuff that work really well. But once again, they might be geared towards a specific set of lighting and might not work well for the NanLights.
You might want to also look at it's Lumen Air, I think. Lumen Air. I've seen it used in a couple shows that I've worked on, and it's pretty. The interface looks really nice. I don't know what it takes to get it set up, but because I haven't had to do it. But the someone who showed it to me on an iPad I was pretty impressed. So Lumen Air, and I think they got the third version out or something. But it's a mobile lighting control that has an interface that you can. A couple interface protocols that you can use for that. But that would put it all on your iPad or iPhone. Vipul?
I checked the specification of this NanLite 150. There is no mention of DMX, so I'm not very sure whether it can be controlled through DMX.
It definitely has it. I have MixPanel. Yeah,
Okay.
I have the MixPanel 60s, which are the smaller version of what Garrick has, and it
Okay.
definitely has a DMX connection and lots of controls
Specs
that I want
doesn't
to
say
control too.
anything. Specs doesn't say anything about DMX. Okay.
Yeah, it definitely has it. I mean, that's all the mix panels, I believe, from NanLite have DMX control.
Then any DMX, I mean USB to DMX controller, whatever Garrick can opt for, that would come with some kind of a software to send DMX signals. So purely it depends on what kind of interface he would want.
Someone should definitely put that in the second hour. Like I'll get somebody to come in and we'll talk DMX. I mean, I think the DMX would be a really fun second hour to talk about.
Okay.
Oh, there's the close up. Someone's got a close up of the 150. There's your DMX in and DMX out controller.
How come they're missing the specs then? Very interesting.
I don't know. We'll talk to them about that. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Beju.
Yeah, I think the recommendation would start with like how much control does Jarek want to start with from the get-go. Like, cause you could buy, I mean, just to learn how DMX works, you could buy like a cheap $150-$200 like 8 fader panel to control DMX, and you can learn a lot just with that. There's no programming or not much programming that you could do, but as a tool just to learn how DMX works, like that could be like a good starting point. But if from the start you already want to do like complex programming, you might on the low end want to start with a software solution for it, wherein you have to buy an interface, DMX to USB interface, and just hook up a cable from your light to it, and do it do the programming on the computer. And on the higher end, you can get a bigger lighting board.
I just want the results, Mickey. Just the results.
We'll get an hour in the next week or two, or next couple of weeks. I think before we buy anything, because I'm trying to figure this out too, and so see if we can't get a round table of a couple people and talk about DMX, at least one. I know Brent Bai is really good at it, so he might be someone I can bring in. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, there's this guy, Jake Goslin. He's on YouTube doing a lot of these tutorial type videos. And he sent out this opportunity to get his little Excel doc that I'm showing here that shows what to buy, and it breaks down to lighting, live streaming. And the thing that he recommends is just this $9.99 DMX control. And then he's got all the cables and links and everything like this. So Eric, I'll send you the link to get signed up for this so that you can see some of the other tools that he uses, like Ableton and some of the clicks and tracks. And he's just got a ton of learning Dante stuff. So I'll put the link in the chat for you to look through it and jump to some of these links, like this DMX, $9.90, or no, actually this one's $72. Sorry, not $9.
Yeah, Beju.
Yeah, just I was like I would go on what Mickey suggested about the hardware panel. If you want to do software and if you want to use the Lumenshare, you need something that converts the ArtNet to physical DMX. So like DMX King, the one that guy was showing off in that does it. NTech does it. There are a few others. They're about $150 to $200, and there's a free app called QXLR Plus, which lets you get into basic lighting control directly on your PC. It's a PC, Linux, Mac. So it's multi-platform. There are a few paid versions as well, but it's a rabbit hole. Like you really, really need to get a second or even a third hour for this probably.
Yeah. Next question.
Well, I'm just want to say now that I've said both Jarek and Garrick, and I totally messed up your last name. what is it so I can get it right next time?
It's I'm very used to all pronunciations, but my mom calls me Garrick Parmalee.
Garrick Parmalee. Thank you so much. All right, moving on to the next question.
You're welcome.
From James Hurley. Any suggestion for managing background network tasks during a stream? Tools, utilities, and so forth. I'm on a Mac.
I mean, the main thing that I do is I'm trying to shut everything down. On a Mac. I mean, all the little things that it wants to load on startup, get rid of those, and try to turn usually I restart my computer before I'm doing something. Now I'm not usually using my Mac to stream, so it's not like that's part of why I like hardware encoders that only have to think about one thing, which is encoding, and those are usually Linux. In my world, so. They're not doing anything else. So I don't have as much sensitivity, but if I'm running anything like Mimo or anything else before the show, I'm going to restart it. I'm going to make sure that nothing else is opened. I'm going to turn off any of the things that I can go through, and any background processes, automatic updates, all that stuff gets turned off or stays off. I don't turn it on any of them. I don't like anything updating for me. So, I mean, those are turning off automatic updates, getting rid of the start things that it wants to load when it starts. On production machines, at least, turning off notifications. I turn off every notification I can in general, but I don't, I don't like to have those things pop up. Even if I'm working, I just don't like to be distracted. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and you're talking on the computer, which is great, but I'm going to talk outside the computer just in case you think that you have a PC over here, the kids are playing games or something like that.
We're running out of time, so that's not part of the question. So answer really quick.
Well, a good router that has the ability to do turning on and off certain types of tasks would be a good start on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one that turn off all the ego settings on your router. It's the number one thing that kills what we do. Mickey?
Would an app like a little snitch help?
It does. You can leave it on. I find that it comes up so often that it's hard for me to tell what's what. I mean, everything needs something. So when you turn on Little Snitch, you suddenly realize how chatty everything is. But I wouldn't use it while I was doing a show, but I would use it as a way to monitor what's actually happening on my computer. A lot of times I'm looking at, the one thing I do have is iStat menu on my Mac, and I'm constantly looking up to see what is using memory, what is using, I'm kind of keeping track of it all the time. The nice thing is I can always see what my bandwidth usage is. I can see a lot of other things. So iStat menu is the one thing that I have running on every machine that I do production on. Next question.
Dr. Ken Cass says, morning all, so appreciate this group. Finally managed to get my mic built now that it's working. Is there any software or compressor you can recommend to use with a Mac with Zoom?
Audio hijack. Like that audio hijack is then you can, it's got some of its own. You can put any of the, standard plugins in VST plugins into it. So at that point you have it. Mickey, do you have any suggested compressors?
Oh, I mean, it's very like subjective, but simple compressors that I like to use that, just work. Our compressor Renaissance compressor from Waves. There's RVox, which is still Waves Renaissance Vox. There's so many. It's very like subjective. Like what do you want to use?
Absolutely. Roscoe?
Hijack does have a compressor built into it also.
Yep. Next question.
Tim Corbin says, does anyone have any experience with Audinate's Dante Via? Is this a better option for network transport of audio versus NDI? They say the latency is about 10 milliseconds.
Go ahead, George.
I know there's a lot of folks on here that give answers, but my experience with it is bad on Dell PCs. Do not load it. It will bring your machine to the ground.
Actually, they just announced over at Avante that they are not supporting any Dell installs because of this issue. So they're requesting that anyone that has the software to not even install it on a Dell machine. So keep that in mind. I just went through the exact same experience here on the 2 PC build I was doing with Dante. It's a bit elaborate and it takes over a lot of different resources that you might not be used to. So the software switching that takes place can be a little off-putting when you're used to other types of formats and routing audio. Play with it, see what you think. It is a cost, incurrence for this process. This software is not free. And you cannot use Dante Via alongside of Dante's virtual sound card. They will not work in conjunction with each other.
Do you want to distinguish Dante Via with Dante Virtual Sound Card?
I would say the virtual sound card is more like VB Audio's cable, the virtual cable, and then you also have the Dante Via, which is more like loopback, or the vMix or the voice meter VBAN system that I kind of showed you a second ago. It's that principle of taking internet signal of audio from one machine to another if you do it right, but it's primarily set up for within your network. You have to use Dante's controller software app to get it to connect to your network and find each occurrence of Dante Via like it would be a Dante network endpoint box, like a receiver and an encoder decoder type thing. But it's not as well versed. It doesn't work quite as well as the hardware stuff does.
Just Jesse and then Baishu and then Mickey. Pretty
Yeah,
quick,
also
we're trying to get through them. Go ahead.
Yeah, Via has 10 milliseconds, I believe, in delay, and then a DVS you can adjust the sort of latency there. And also, Via, I believe, only works with 2 channels, and DVS is like sort of a one-to-one patching matrix audio routing platform.
Baishu and then Mickey.
Yeah, the biggest difference between those two is like for VI, you don't require Dante hardware to be on the network. You can connect VI instances to another VI instance or DVS on another machine. For DVS, you do need some piece of Dante hardware with the chip on it to act as the clocking master. That's the biggest difference in there. But now practically it's cheaper to just buy a simple AVIO adapter and use that as a clock rather than depend on VIA for it because it is not reliable.
There you go. All right, next question.
I think James Babbitt's for the second hour, so I'm going to push down to George Kennedy Jr.'s. Where does latency need to be to accomplish real-time conversation relating to SRT and NDI across the web?
Real time is a very subjective thing of what it takes to do conversation. Satellite often lived in the 1,000 to 1,200 milliseconds for decades, right? When we hear from someone in Afghanistan, it was, you'd see people nod like this. That the reason they're nodding is so that they're doing something to let you know that they're hearing it going through. So this is a pretty luxurious thing that we have here to be able to do this at 200 milliseconds or 250 milliseconds between. So our measurements of Zoom is about 200 to 240. Somewhere in that range is where Zoom kind of sits. Skype sits at about 330. So 330 to 360 is kind of where Skype normally sits. Skype TX sits at about 600, and this is per leg. So Skype TX starts to get close to satellite sometimes. So it starts to slow down. LTN sits at about 150, and the switch sits at 50 to 75, is kind of where, so there's a range of when you get from point to point somewhere in the world. I mean, there's obviously a level of physics that starts to limit everything, but there's all the hardware it has to go through to get through it, which is kind of amazing that in a 1/10 of a second or 2/10 of a second, you can get video to somewhere else. Anyway, I would say that 200 to 300 milliseconds is really the outer edge of what we prefer. Like 350 is about the upper end of what I prefer to have. I start to really feel it over 350. So that's why we stopped using Skype TX boxes. They were fine to bring somebody in to talk with us where it was just one leg. They were not fine when we were using them as two people talking over Skype to each other via a Skype TX box, in my opinion, is not usable. It's a really slow and uncomfortable conversation. And so that's why we use Zoom for that, is because that per leg transport is much lower. It also has more. Zoom will have more anomalies at 1080p. You'll have more packet loss and so on and so forth because it's cutting a little bit of that safety net off. But I would say 350 for me 350 per leg is kind of the outer edge of that. If it goes over that, and the problem that I find is that most SRT sits at 500 and above. And when you take SRT down to 350, you are in a place where it wasn't designed for. So it starts to get, I feel like it starts to get less stable. It's not secure. It's not real. It's ST. It's secure transport, but not reliable anymore. So that's been my experience so far with it. SRT is something that pass information, into a subsystem. So one of the things we're experimenting with is like a bunch of SRT ingests into a vMix in the cloud. They're not talking to each other, but I'm going from this city to this city or this thing to that. So I have an event over here, an event over here, and I want to submix those and then stream them out, over AWS. SRT works great, but you move that up to 1 or 2 seconds because it doesn't matter. So it's but at low latency for a real-time conversation, I would say 350. Anyone else? We think about it a lot. we talk about it a lot. Anyway, next question.
Jamie Farr of Silver Screens, Maryland, has a question for the video mavens, and I know we don't do a lot of politics here, but he asked, does the president's latest White House lawn video look like it was shot in front of a green screen? So the real question may be, what are the tells for green screen that people say, oh, that's not done right?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Oh, I thought he was talking about this. I thought he was talking about this picture right here with the audio. That's not what he was talking about. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I don't know. I didn't look at it. I saw it go by because someone tweeted it at me and said, "Is this green screen?" And I don't know because I saw like a low resolution on my iPhone, so I don't know whether it was green screen or not. What you're looking for typically is lighting not matching, black levels not matching, smooth edges. So smooth hair or that smooth hair is or smooth edges. I mean, you may not see any idiosyncrasies, but something that looks a little cut out. But it's the audio the lighting not matching, the black levels not matching, and smooth edges tends to be the real. And then the final one that some of us will notice and some of us won't will be focal length variation, where the shot behind it is obviously shot with a different lens than the forward. Garrick and then Kev, but keep it pretty quick. We're gonna go into the next section here in a second.
They didn't help themselves out when they shot that because it's a really super sharp lens, a long focal length that really compressed the background, made it go out of focus, made him super, super sharp. And then they used a microphone that really cut out all of the wind noise. And so it sounds like he's in a studio. But the compression... Yeah.
With the compression, it's hard to tell. I'm going to guess that it's not, just because
the lighting.
Technically,
it's not green screen. If you look at the shadows falling off his face and under his waving hands, the lighting's correct for that.
Yeah, I would say that if I was gonna lay money on it, I'd say that it's a straight shot. I'd say that it was just shot out there. It's just shot in a funky way, but it's not. I don't think it's green screen. Anyway, next question.
Unlike the rest of us, they have access to the White House lawn, so why not? Michael Vosby, Woodstock, Georgia. Excuse me. Is it okay to have access to more XLR inputs by running one mixer into another?
Yeah, we do that all the time over Dante. Yeah, so we use the X32s as Dante boxes for the Yamaha QL1s or CO5s all the time because they're great. You can get to them, you can control their gains, you can, and they're much cheaper than getting a Rio. so it's a cheap interface box. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, Alex, I assume with that setup, you get ISO tracks to your actual like QL5 main mixer.
Yes.
But just in case, like Michael is asking about, essentially making what is called a submix, and getting that submix into another larger mixer to do your final mixing. Yes, that's a fairly common thing to do. Especially like in sports. Usually in sports, you have one person just handling the effects mix. When you say effects mix, that's, well, back then the crowd and and the basketball through the hoop. You have one person just making the effects mix, be that in stereo 5171 and now sometimes Atmos. One person makes that mix that is then thrown to all the different networks that broadcast the event, and they put in their own commentary on top of the effects mix. And yeah, that's a sub mix. Or sometimes like even on concerts, and let me know if I'm rambling on too much. In concerts, like if you have like a main act and then you have several like opening acts, sometimes the main act wants their own front of house board, that is the main board, and the opening acts will have their own board that feeds into the main board. And a lot of times like the main front of house mixers push down the opening acts a bit just so that the main acts sound louder.
A little subtle insider data for you. We're gonna move on because we gotta go next question.
Kyle Hammond from Chicago says, lately I've noticed Final Cut Pro 10 draining the battery on my 16-inch MacBook Pro even while it's plugged in. Is this a battery issue? Do they have to take it to this? Do I have to take it to the store to test?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, so there's
Real
a
quick.
lot of things that can affect. Go ahead. There's a lot of things that
Real
can
quick,
affect
'cause
this. I'm
we're
gonna do it
running
real quick. If you are using certain kinds of footage, it might have to be constantly transcoding in the background, and that's going to put a bigger battery draw on than if you're using ProRes or something native. So that's just one thing to look at.
Get the most powerful wall wart you can get for your Mac. I don't know which one you have with that one, but get the thickest, beefiest one, because I'm running out. I'm having it reverse drain relatively often. I have a brand new computer, Guy.
Yeah, I had the same exact problem. I went ahead and got this CalDigit TS3 hub, and the nice thing about it is it has a beefier power supply, and then you can also take the other one and put it in your bag. So when you travel, you have that thing always ready to go. So even though this thing's $249, I love it. It's a great device.
That's great. Next question.
Alex from Beltsville, Maryland says, recommended webcams with built-in microphones for an under $300 budget. Client is considering a Logitech Stream Cam.
I wouldn't use I would rather have my own mic than to have a built-in mic. That's all I'll say is you can't really get. I haven't seen anything that gets good audio. We've talked about this a couple times, but I haven't seen anything that gets good audio from a webcam. So I would rather get a less expensive. Stream Cam is only $150. It's a good camera. I have one around here somewhere. I like the Brio better at $199 because I can control it remotely. It's a 4K and I reframe things often with users. So I'm a bigger fan of the Brio. And then the Huddle Cam we talked about a little earlier has got HDMI out and it's got some remote control, but that's at $299. So that's going to be what you're doing. If you get something like a Stream Cam or a Brio, you have money to get a mic. A headset mic is what I'd recommend, just because it's easier for people to do it. So and at that point you pay $150 for a camera, $150 for a mic. You get a pretty good headset mic. We found ones for $10 that work really well. But you can definitely get, in that range, you can start to get a good headset mic that works well. If they don't want that, you're in the range of getting everything from Snowballs to MV51s to Yetis. Those are all things that you could buy and have the camera, and it's going to sound way better. Just remember that sound is 70% of a online experience. So that's why we can sit there and listen to each other, and people can listen to this every day, is because we've got good mics, not because we have good cameras are important too, but the mics are really what take it over the top. All right, running a little heavy, we're going to shift gears and talk a little bit about, and everyone just jump in, just raise your hand as if you have questions about how shows get started. So we're really not talking about logistics or planning ahead of the time, but really what we want to think about when we're actually getting into the show. So what happens in the last couple hours before a show, and I'll give you a little bit of my perspective of that, because I think it's a super important part of the show, and I think that a lot of times people aren't methodical about it, so it becomes this thing that especially when you get started in streaming, you're not paying as much attention to. So the couple things that I'll say as we get started, and again, if you have questions, throw them up. I'm gonna vamp here for just a second, and but think about the things that if you're doing these kinds of events, what that would look like. The main thing is that the first thing that I'll just say real quickly, I said no logistics, but we want to leave the day before, we want to leave ready for the show. Like we could walk in and we really look at it as I could run the show if I had to with 30 minutes, from the time I walk into the building to the time the show is live. I could do it. I leave and I'll stay up all night if I have to. What I don't do almost ever is, we'll sort that out tomorrow. You don't want to sort anything out on the day of the event. You know, the day of the event is unless you're doing a same day load in, which is something I try to avoid at an incredible level. I don't even like doing shoots on the same day. You know, I like to load in the day before. Part of that comes down to, and this is the thing that this is the thing, kind of the crux of why I wanted to talk about this, is that in the end, it's going to be more important to not just survive an event, but when you really want to take the event to the next level, you want to have it be a great experience on the day of the event. Obviously, as many days before the event, you want it to be a great experience, but you want, when you are frazzled going into an event, when the client is frazzled and panicked, when the hosts are frazzled and panicked, when the participants are frazzled and panicked, it's just not a good show. You know, like there's a much higher chance of error. And people are all, you know, like one of the reasons that we do in office hours, we, an hour before, I open this up an hour before. Why do I do that? Is because when we get started at 7 o'clock, we're moving. You know, there isn't like, you know, no one would show up for office hours, and very few people would show up if we fuddled around for the first 10 minutes of every show trying to get everything working. You know, like the reason that it's a good experience for people who choose to, I personally think that the first half hour is the best hour. The first 40 minutes is some of the best hours that we have. Not always, but a vast majority of the time, because we're just free forming and we're just doing it, and it's a lot of fun. But we deal with technical issues, we deal with other things, we work through it. And for people who just want to hear the show, we want to make sure they have a great experience at 7. You know, and so getting everybody ready and getting everything going in a kind of a methodical way makes a big difference. We always try to load in, unless we're doing a multi-day event and I'm trying to preserve union hours or people's energy or whatever. If we're only doing one day event, we want to be there 4 hours ahead of time. We want to, you know, like and that's if I'm all set up, I want to be there 4 hours ahead of time. If the start is at 8 o'clock in the morning, I want to be there at 4 a.m. And people will roll their eyes and everything else, but I want to be there for what I'm taking into account is that, you know, live shows are unforgiving. I've had, you know, things. We had a sprinkler system go off on our event one time. We've had rain, we've had leaks, we've had power issues, we've had all these other things. When I say 4 hours, I know that I'm going to be ready in a half an hour. I'm taking into account all the things that reasonably could go wrong. I can't account for a fire that burns everything up or do, you know, anything outside of that 4 hour window, and then I'm also assuming that I work on a lot of things where security becomes an issue, where half an hour of security, there might be a half an hour getting through the mags. No, the mags are what you go through for security, but getting through the mags, the magnetometers, to get in there might be a long line the day of the event. And so you're taking into account all the things that could go wrong as people load in so that they can get in, so that they can get set up. And then the goal that I have is that everybody is flat at 2 hours before the event. So we don't have any more lower thirds. We don't have any more graphics. We don't have any more playback. We don't have any more. Now, the reason I'm doing that is not so that we all sit there and stare at it. I know that my client is going to come in and have a whole bunch of new things they want to do, you know, and so, you know, they thought of something or there's a change or whatever. What I don't want to be doing is trying to do last minute things while they're asking for new things. You know, I want to be ready for the client and, we've got to change this lower third and everything else. And we've got all these other things. And you're just like, oh yeah, sure. I got that, you know, and so you are managing your own space so that when the client comes in and is trying to make a couple changes or there's something unknown or there's something going wrong, you're not trying to, what happens is the things that you thought you were going to put off until then are now not getting done, you know, and then you're not ready. Sky, did you have a comment there?
Well, you talked about having to switch out an entire switcher that failed.
Yeah.
And because you built in the time to do that, you could.
And I had a backup switcher and a router. And I go with 2 switchers, you know, like it's not, you know, like I do. I mean, you know, but the thing is that you know, with the Black Magic stuff, it's not as expensive. So I have 2 of them. You know, I just have a primary backup. I've got a router. I've got a patch panel. I could hard patch between the stuff so that if I needed to. And I don't use a separate control board because I have software to do that. You know, like I could survive a show inside of the Black Magic software. And so you have, you know, primary backup of a lot. I have primary backup of a lot of things, but to get back into the planning, you want to think about that. and we usually have someone calling out, 1 hour out, half an hour out, like, letting people know that they're, making sure people are present to the fact that we're dialing it in. You definitely want to push clients gently to get the last little, squeeze out the last little changes they want to make, as gently as you can. But again, the thing to think about for your client, for your hosts, for your guests, is how do we get as flat as we can early, so that everyone can just settle and be ready for their, be present for their event. The mistake that a lot of people make with online events is they tell everyone to show up 15 minutes before. If you've got 6 people, they're going to do a round table. It's not enough time. It's not enough time to be ready. It's not enough time to be ready and flat. So for most of the events where we have control of it, we want you to be there a minimum of an hour. If you're a panelist, we want you to be there a minimum of an hour before, and you can check in and then leave, but we want to see you an hour before, in your setup with your lights and your mics, so that I can tell whether you're ready to go or not. And we can work with you on it. Even then, we already worked with you a week or 2 weeks before. We sent you all the gear, or we established what your gear was. We worked through it. We made sure that you had a wired connection, that you were in the right place, that you had good lighting. We flattened the curve. We don't want to do that on the day of the event. And then on the day of the event, though, we still want to see you there. And then we're going to work through that. And then again, we want to give you time to go relax, and just get into what you're doing, so that you can be present. I see one event after another where people are they start the show completely frazzled, and I always think of that as it's like a, every guest is like a flower, like this very delicate, beautiful flower. And if you go like this the whole time, right, before the event, you top it up and it's all kind of crinkled, because you just whacked them, and so, and then you're expecting them to be beautiful. And so how you have, and a lot of our work has come from someone does an event with us, and it was so much better than all the other events that they just come back. And it's not about, when we get back into that whole pricing thing, it's not commoditized. They're not trying to figure out the cheapest one. They're just like, oh, that was a lot better, and that was a lot smoother than what we were expecting, and, sometimes you're limited to your client, that your client is not organized enough to do this, but you want to think through those things. Let me go to a couple questions here. Go ahead, Bill. Do you want to pop up the questions there?
Sure, happy to. James Babbitt is in first with, before the show, what is involved in making a complete plan for the show, leading up to what happens right before the show?
There's checklists. And a lot of those checklists are driven, we have a producer that's got a checklist of these are the things that need to be done. And a lot of it's driving as a producer, trying to drive all those things that need to be done, whether the audio needs to be ready, the video needs to be ready, graphics are ready, all the live streaming tests. So we're streaming. Our encoders turn on when we walk in the room. They're streaming to some kind of test location, something because it's not just that I'm looking at the encoder or the ingest point, I'm watching the internet in the building. So usually our stuff is running through a Meraki. And so we're constantly looking at the graph, because by streaming it, we're doing a nominal push all the time, so that I can watch in the Meraki. Is it, am I getting the bandwidth that I expect? If I see dropouts, then there's a whole bunch of conversations that happen. And generally, when we're setting up a day or two before an event, our encoders are running all the time. It's just running just pushing bits down the path, because what I'm doing is measuring the network, and seeing if there's there shouldn't be any. Like if there's any glitch, there's a whole bunch of conversations with IT about why we're not seeing that, or why we're seeing some little dropout, and little dropouts are all we need to see before we're upset, about the process. So, again, the big thing is it's different for me. It's different for every show. It's not like a specific rundown that we work through. It depends on what the show looks like, but you are going through making sure that all your graphics are ready. People have read them all, looked at them all. Any final changes with the client, you're thinking through that. Now, a lot of times on the day of the event is when we get some of the talent. Virtual events are a little different, but are we going to do rehearsals? Sometimes we're doing the rehearsal an hour or 2 hours before the event. With the final talent, we may not see them until then in virtual events a lot, and so we're going through making sure they understand the run of show. One of the things to understand is that the most important thing is how to get in and how to get out. So like many things in life, how do you get in and how do you get out makes a big difference. And so really we will rehearse the beginning of the live stream over, and my goal is to get to a point where people are bored. like there wasn't any glitch, there wasn't any stress. We just understand, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and then we're going to go, and so we're a lot of rehearsal, a lot of process, to get to that point. Lots of conversations about what that's going to look like. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, your point, when you're working with professionals and or people that are presenting, I'm working with a lot of volunteers, and to get them bored means they think it's easy. And so I see Mickey's comment or nodded his head, and I guess I'm trying to figure out they don't know the amount of effort, time, and energy it took to get to this point, because they're civilians, they're inundated with so much content all the time that looks really good. Now that these civilians are now playing at a job that you and I've spent 30 years doing. And I see George has got an answer. I love, maybe that's.
Go ahead, George.
No,
I'm working with a lot of civilians.
I was sorry, I was raising my hand to come back to Alex, but go ahead, Sky. I'll wait.
Well, how do you work with civilians that I want to get my profession? I guess I'm just anxious that people think, oh, this is easy, and it's not. And
well, the one thing so I was fortunate enough that most of my work 30 years ago for events was with volunteers, and volunteers are the best training ever. Like so I was accountable for, they brought me in and I was a volunteer to handle parking for events. And, and I turned, but here's what happened is it was really hard to get people to be on the parking team. What the issue that we had was there's 190 people showing up in 15 minutes, and you're in an office park, and everyone around doesn't want them parking in their space. There's people, you have spaces that are available, and there were 190 spaces available to us, but you had to not have them go into somebody else's parking area. And so the big thing with volunteers is playing a bigger game. So volunteers burn out when you're having them break rocks. What volunteers want to do is build a cathedral, and so that it's the same operation, but you have to play this bigger game. And so the funny thing is about volunteers is that they're doing the same thing, but having them connected to it and then really focusing on doing it really well. Not that you think that you should be easy on them because they are volunteering, you're getting them for free. But really what you want to do is be more exacting, make them better, because then they feel like it's not just that they're doing something good, but they're improving themselves. And everybody, the fundamental thing about it, everybody loves to be good at something. Whatever it is, you just want to, it's more enjoyable when you feel like you're good at it. And so we went, before it was like no one would volunteer, and it was always the people you didn't want to put on the rest of the team. And then I took over the parking team, and I treated all the cars. I explained to everybody that the cars were aircraft, and we're going to bring the aircraft in, And so literally we made sure that you always had a point of contact where you could see another one of us, right? And we treated people like aircraft, and I really got people going like this, like bring them in like this, and then, do this to get them into the thing. And it was like, boom, the whole thing, it was like this little dance, and all these cars come in 190 cars come in 15 minutes, and no one stops up. There's no wait. Everyone had a great experience. And then I was like the head of parking for, I don't know, a year. So when they did these events, I would do all the parking.
Be careful what you're good at. Yes.
Yeah. And then, but I got really good at it. And then I trained other people to do it. And then I moved on to managing seminars, and then I became the team leader for the seminar. So I was accountable. This is when I was like 22 years old. I was accountable for 110 volunteers managing 10 different seminars, and so I was I was just managing the team leaders, who I had trained, not team leaders, the production supervisors who I had trained. And so I was just dealing with their stuff, and I would always do one seminar just to figure things out, and anyway, but we would be incredibly exacting. And what we did is we kept on playing games. So we kept on playing bigger games of we used to have this thing of holds per 100. So when the seminar starts, how many heads are left without someone next to them, so that because in the middle of the seminar, the people are gonna have to walk down and walk in front of people and sit down in that. And we want to avoid that. So we want to try to get everyone to sit at the centermost seat, and then go out. And how do we do that? How do we make sure that everyone's sitting on time? And then we would literally rehearse how we'd hand you the mic. Like how we when we run mic, how we're going to exactly how you hold the papers and go down. And not every team did this. Our teams did that, and they were playing this bigger game because there was this incredible operation. And the reason I bring this up is because it is such an important piece of it is to play figuring out volunteers are, learning how to do that is the most important thing for team building, because if you can manage 100, it was the best training I ever had was just to have to, because they don't have to be there. They can leave. If you screw it up, they're going to be gone. They're not going to show up next Sunday, or next Monday or next Thursday or whatever it is. And so you have to, there has to be this empowerment, and there has to be this, and everything I've done since then has been driven from this learning because I screwed it up a lot. I was harsh at first. But what I would say though, is that as you look at live streams, it's figuring out how, it's not taking it lightly. It's actually going the other direction is what makes it interesting for the volunteer, is to take it and make it harder, and not harder in a way that's just, they have to be caught up they have to see that, oh, we're working on something bigger. Like, let's make this the best that we can make it
takeaway from
possibly
you
be.
has been cast the vision and inspire, because you're going to beat volunteer to death if you're just, demanding. So
it's all about, and a lot of it has to, especially with volunteers, has to be couched in, this is, great work. And thanks for being here, and let's see if we can tighten this up, or it's not yelling at them or being upset, but it's useful for, I know a lot of us have a lot of volunteers when we're doing live events. And so it's really important piece of it. We won't go much further to digress into that, but Garrick and Bill real quick, and then we'll.
Yeah. I've been leading volunteer teams for our church, doing live production for the last 8 years. And a couple things that I keyed on was, my passion for the mission gets them to have passion for the mission, and then that gets buy-in from them, and then they start to want to do better. Praising publicly all the time when someone does something right, always giving them good kudos, always never showing my own frustration with someone that isn't maybe at the level I want them to be at, always
so
being
hard.
positive.
That is
Yeah.
so hard.
So all of those things really, really help. And, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's great. Bill?
My observation is that I don't think it's ever been easier in the history of production arts to get from totally incompetent to mediocre. These better cameras, microphones, and things like that mean that you can buy these things like a $400 camcorder and make decent pictures. But getting from incompetent to mediocre is as easy as can be, but then moving from mediocre toward expertise is always as hard as it has ever been, which means that it's incredibly difficult. It's a huge logarithmic change to get from 50 to 60%, and then a bigger one to get from 60 to 70. And the true professionals in this are living up there above 85, 95, and the great artists of our time get up towards 100%. And that is ridiculously difficult to achieve. But we see a lot of that in our media feeds. People have spent long careers and are the best of the best. And we think it's like that 0 to 50 journey. It's not.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things we have to realize is that what we watch on TV is there's a big crew. There's a big crew on these shows. Like when you watch, and they've been doing this for a long time. I got to sit in the back of ABC News watching ABC News happen, and in one little room, and this isn't everybody working on it, just in the control room, there are like 15 people packed in there. There's 2 producers that are only worried about the time. How much time is left in the show? That's 2 people that all they think about all day is, for that half an hour is, how are we we're 30 seconds heavy, we're 45 seconds late, we're, whatever, and trying to manage it so that we get down to at the end, very, very close to the top of the hour. So I think that we have to realize that one of the reasons we give ourselves so much time to get ready for a live event is because we don't have that crew, and we have to make sure that we are ready for, we're not doing the same thing over and over again. Most of my shows are bespoke. I'm going to do it once. I'm never going to do that show again, and so we have to be very careful of, being ready for that. As we, get closer to the top of the hour, and I generally recommend starting at the top of the hour. It makes it easier for everybody to remember. People get into this thing like they want to start at 10:15 or 10:30 or 10:37 or whatever. We try to do it. We want to start at the top of the hour, and then we play a game of, can we get it to start at the atomic time? So you'll hear us as we're getting ready. We'll play a counter into YouTube. Let's say if we're streaming to YouTube, So we have the live counter in front of us and we have the YouTube screen next to it. You'll hear someone yell 11 seconds or 19 seconds or 22 seconds is nominal offset, and that means that we are measuring it and we know that YouTube is today 19 seconds behind or 22 seconds behind. We then start our countdown clocks 20 seconds ahead or 22 seconds ahead or 19 seconds ahead, so that because the countdown clock syncs the entire crew. They don't have to look at the clock. They look at the countdown clock going out, and we're just, when we get to 0, we're going to go. And what we're trying to do is set it up so that when literally right at 000 is the first frame that pops out on YouTube or on Facebook, and they're all different. You have to decide which one you're going to do because they're all different offsets, but whatever your primary one is. And again, this gets back into that whole play, aim small, hit small. Is that you're trying to always work with your crew to hit the smallest target, because if they hit it even close, it's way tighter than it would have been otherwise. And so we play these little games if we're under control. And there's basically, we've talked about this a little bit before, but I wanted to put it into this hour, is that there's 4 ways to start your show, in my opinion. There is, the best way is a pre-show, having people talk before the show. You get a host, you get a couple people, you're doing roundtables, you're doing other things. That is the best way to start a show, because it starts to engage the audience. It warms them up. When you go to see, a night show, the late night show or whatever, you're in there and they're telling you jokes and they're getting you warmed up and they're doing all that stuff. It's the same thing. It's just getting your audience warmed up, getting them there, giving them something to watch. So a really well-built pre-show is the way to do this. Is the way to start a show. Second best way is content. So you play out some content. You always want a little ticker somewhere in the corner to let people know, hey, we're really starting the real show at this time. But here's a bunch of videos for you to watch, and here's a bunch of other bits and pieces to watch, and here's there's all these things that you can, that can entertain you as we get up, and you can do a lot of messaging that way. Make sure to check this out. Make sure to do this thing. Make sure to, that type of thing. And so that's another piece of that. Then the third best way is a countdown clock, which we end up using a lot because people don't have something to put in to that piece. And then the worst way to start, other than starting right at the top of the hour, the worst way to start is with a still that says starting soon. That is, if you put that on a social network, you'll do that 5 minutes before the show and you lost 75 to 80% of your viewers. They just go up to it. They don't know when you're starting. They don't know why you're here. They don't, and they just won't stay unless you are an incredible powerhouse. No one's going to stay for a thing. So the countdown clock is that next piece. And again, on Zoom, it really helps you because you don't have to cue your host. Just you rehearse with the host. When it gets to 0, go. And the one thing that we do is, especially if we're going to something like YouTube, we make sure that we jump out of that slate just a little early to make sure that we have a good edit point, for the host, so that we can cut when we trim the event, we can trim out the host, out of that, or trim out the countdown clock. But we get really into the countdown clocks if you're going to do them. I grabbed a couple of them just to, let me see if I can, pull these up easily here. There we go. Let's see. I don't know why. For some reason, it brought it into 2 sections, and there's no real reason. But I'm going to show you a couple of these anyway, just to kind of give you a sense of what we do here. Some of these are older, some of them are newer. But I thought I'd just show you a bunch of them just so you get a sense of how much different they are. What we're really looking for when we do a countdown clock is to do something that is really captures the event, or that captures what we're going to do. So this is Google Science Fair, catching fire. Are you guys seeing these? I never trust.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is where I put the countdown clock down at the bottom. There's one with the actual piece in it, starting at, and this one, for instance, I just got all the raw elements and I put them to, I put together the look, for that piece. Well, actually I got some raw elements to this and put it together. Same with this one. This is what we were talking about before, where the biggest problem with this was matching the biggest trouble with this one was matching the text with and I didn't get the color quite right, but I got pretty close to the same one there. But with each one of these, you're trying to, and some of them, see, then there's our starting soon slide there. I think I have another one here just to give you a couple more of them. But I've had to build, a lot of these. But what you want to look for, what you want to notice is that they're all very different. And the goal is that we're trying to take their font. We're trying to take, this one was really, they gave me the design of what they wanted to look like. But then I also noticed that their text was a little soft. So I had to add a blur to the text in video to, kind of make that work. But with all of these, you're kind of, depending on what what they all look like, you are trying to find a way that they all kind of, fit in. This was this one for 24. Obviously, I felt like the text was, what we were going to do with that was, was obvious.
It's client branding, isn't it, Alex?
Yeah, you're still branding. All of these are still
client
branding.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're trying to make sure that it all kind of fits into the overall feel and look. It's not something that's just holding space. I think a lot of times I see people's countdown clocks and I go, they're just like, they put something up and there's some kind of automatic little filter that throws your countdown clock up, and it should be just as much part of your show as your show is. You're setting that show up, and you're having people feel like they're part of it. So, that's one of just a couple examples of the countdown clocks that we use. But they become more important with things like Zoom, and we use them a lot for Hangouts because it allowed us to queue people. The reason we got really into them was to queue the other side. You're going to get to 0 and you're going to start, and that's that's one of the things that we, kind of work towards. And I got to a point where I love building them. I mean, I like thinking about what the countdown clock's going to be. Sky.
I just want to say, I feel like coming from Kansas, you just pulled the curtain back and I saw behind the curtain. And so again, just thank you. I mean, these are still tools that we have to figure out and how to work and exercise with, but you're showing us the tools and the hard work and the years and years of experience. So just thanks.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks. Let's go to the next question.
Ranjan Sandil has actually, in Los Angeles, has a couple of questions. The first one is, we use Google Docs to collaborate for pre-show, but it's not a great on-site as the internet access might become an issue. What other collaboration software do others use versus printing it out? And then he has a follow-up.
I will admit that because I stream, we use Google Docs because if we don't have internet for Google Docs, we're not going to be able to run the event. so it's like we don't print them out because we change things so the clients and everybody else changes things so often we end up printing things over and over again. I do have some TDs that like to print stuff out at the last minute, a couple minutes before they'll print it out. So they absolutely have something. Nothing can happen to their computer. And we have had things where the computer lost power. Like they weren't. Yeah, there you go. It wasn't charged, like the power got pulled out and you didn't notice it, and then the power went out for the computer right before the show, and our show caller had nothing. Like nothing, like they were just like, what, and so it can happen. So that having paper is a good backup, but we use Google Docs a lot for that. I don't know of any. There are a lot of there's ShowFlow and there's a bunch of other apps that are really good. We've just had a hard time. Everybody knows Docs, and so it's become kind of a thing that's hard to get out of just because everyone knows it. Go ahead, Leland.
I was just going to mention the ShowFlow thing and the fact that when we use Google Excel sheets or spreadsheets, however you want to call those things anymore, and we tend to put a show card graphic in a frame as well. And that's something that we would typically print out as the actual storyboard, I should say, so that you can see what scenes you're going to be dealing with in that production. It's a good thing to have a flip through to see, okay, what's the next scene? Here's the next scene. It's right here in front of you. Otherwise, leave it in the doc and just work on it online.
Yep. Sky.
Well, as the show continues to flux or you needed to hit a deadline, that's where I've seen those shows you can manipulate and it retimes things for you. I guess if it's a live show that doesn't have a time schedule, is that why Google Docs works?
Well, we're doing live shows, and we're not. Rundown Creator is really good when you're trying to calculate it. So Rundown Creator is for a lot of shows. So we've used that in a bunch of shows where we're really trying to calculate the end time.
Yeah.
What I tell a lot of clients is that we're no longer constrained, by time, at least, if not time and space, but we're no longer constrained by, like, we don't have to fit into a 44-minute window or a 60-minute window or a 22-minute window. We don't have commercial breaks, and we shouldn't get ourselves, the more we tie ourselves into time, the more we take you don't want to hang on things for too long. We have a constrained time here because it makes sense because we're doing it over and over and over again. But when we're doing an event and it feels like it should go a little longer, let it go. You know, like if I've watched so many shows that are peaking on their viewership at 40 minutes, and they cut it off because someone told them that 40 minutes is the right length for a show. You know, like, and you're like, oh my gosh, you are like everyone, because the other thing that happens in online events, if you have interactivity, it warms up. So like when we start, you know, it warms up 20 or 30 minutes into an event is when people are just warming up to that process. And so that's why, you know, longer events with interactivity, you just want to let them go, you know, and you can, you know, people they'll come in and out on their own, but you want to let it keep moving. Go ahead, George.
So I'm just curious about show flows. Obviously, we have them all the shows that we do, especially for when I'm behind the switcher. So I generally will read the show flow, you know, the day before or a couple of hours before the show, but generally I don't look at a show flow if I'm switching. I'm just listening for cues. I'm just curious what everyone else does as far as when you actually behind the switcher. Are you reading? It's kind of hard to, if you have like 100 cues on the show, to try to read a script if you're behind the switcher.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's when you need a show caller. It just depends on how complicated the show is, and if you again, you have to decide when you need more people, you know. And so one of the things that you need to make sure of is someone managing that. If it's a complicated show, if it's a simple show, you can get away with the TD reading it and kind of just knowing where they're going or even remembering it. Once the show gets to a certain complexity, you need a director or a show caller or both to, you know, because as soon as you start getting to stage things, it becomes a different piece. And so again, you want with each one of these, you don't need everybody for every show, but you do need to make decisions about when that complexity hits. And that is, to get back to what happens right before the show, that is a key piece of how chaotic it is generally a direct function of how many people you were short. You know, so if you have enough people, it's a pretty calm experience, you know, and everybody knows what they're doing. It's a pretty calm experience. If it's chaotic, you're probably understaffed, you know, or underskilled, or both. Go ahead, Garrick.
One thing that we do, but our shows are church, and it's every week, but we have someone who's kind of keeping us on task with what's happening when. So new verse, chorus, new song, someone speaking. But I always I'm not very good with music, so I always print out all of the lyrics for all the songs that we're doing, and then in those lyrics I make notes about the key points I want to hit. I make notes about where I want to start and where I want to end, and how I'm going to handle the transition. And I keep that on an iPad right next to me, and refer to that as I'm directing the show. And I always look at it as not the plan I'm going to stick to, but it's the thing I can go back to when everything goes off the rails. So that's how I kind of handle that.
That's great. Go ahead, Sky.
Garrick, we use a thing called Planning Center, which is a show rundown concept. And I guess as I'm listening to this, I'm also looking at our analytics. And we talked about this before, that people would only come in for the sermon, but I'm also analytically now seeing our peak in the last 22 weeks has been at 20 minutes in. And so consequently, I'm starting to hear what you're saying is our goal is engagement. Our goal is connection.
And that gets into, if you start a, this gets back into the thing, if you start a conversation 20 minutes before, then you're trying to get your peak to right when you started the show, not your peak later. You know, that's part of the thing. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, kind of like what happens here. Like, you know, you ask for the questions, you know, at what time is it at your time? 6:40, 20 minutes before the show.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're giving people time. You know, we're starting an hour before. We're giving people time to get situated and kind of build up that relationship with each other every day, to, you know, just whatever is kind of going on, so that the panel is ready. Admittedly, the first 40 minutes is really for the panel, right? For what we do, it's for the panel to kind of deal with what they want to deal with.
I just keep thinking of going to a track meet, and of course the athlete has rehearsed and practiced and exercised, and of course the athlete is stretching and getting ready for the gun to go off and run. But for some reason we have it, use that analogy. And Leland had an
well, again, if you work in broadcast, if you work in like, if I was on I've been on network shows a couple times as a like a expert, whatever, and they call me 3 hours before to make sure I'm still going to be available. Then they want me on typically 90 minutes before, and then they want to check in with me again 40 minutes before, and at 20 minutes. At 20 minutes before, they don't want, if I stand up, I will get a phone call. Like, they want me to be, like if I do anything that means that clears their frame 20 minutes before a this is for a network broadcast. If I clear frame 20 minutes before the show, someone will call me immediately and ask me to sit down. I did it once. That's why I know. I had to go to the bathroom. So but they were like, I mean, literally it was 30 seconds. There's someone there watching me, making sure that I'm there. But that's what we don't get in live streaming, is understanding that the reason that most broadcast works most of the time is a lot of pre-pro and a lot of planning. And that's why I wanted to talk about this a little bit. It's just that we just have to really get there. There's a lot of stuff that goes on to make sure that what we see on TV every day works. It's not what you, it's just not what you think about otherwise. Go ahead, George.
I think one of the things, and you practice here a lot on these Zooms every morning, is that when Mickey is done and you come back, everyone automatically knows to go to silence and no one is really chatting. So I practice this a lot in my head for my own sanity, is that when 10 minutes before show, unless you're the main client or the director, I don't want anyone in my head, let's stop worrying about all the extra stuff. I mean, worry, yes, but don't, all the gymnastics needs to stop, and just any fixing or patching needs to stop at least 15 minutes before the show.
And one thing we'll talk about on another hour on comms is comm etiquette. But one thing is that in general, we try to discourage small talk on comms. Like in general, we try to discourage it. We don't always discourage it, but it's in general, and definitely hour before the show, no small talk. During the show, no small talk. Operators that can't get the hint when we say, hey, let's be quiet, and they come back and start talking about yesterday's game during the show, which is very common in corporate camera operators. And we just try to weed them out over time. We can't always let them go at that moment, but we just try not to call them again, because we like a quiet show. Hosmuk?
So for the 2 cooking classes that I've had, I had a rundown clock, admitted the people before the top of the hour, beginning of the show, and they would see the rundown clock. And then at the clock, the talent would commence the class. I'm listening to what you're saying about hitting peak at the time when you start the show. So should I let people in and have a general conversation without the talent being on the stage, and get everybody? So
it's always going to be better.
Warm up the conversations even amongst the attendees, so they can maybe talk to each other. And then so the clock is still running, but on the hour, the talent then comes in like you do at 4 o'clock sharp. Okay.
Yep. And in the best world, you'll have a little counter in the corner that's supered over your video that just has a countdown clock to the event starts, here, but you're having a conversation, you're talking to folks, you're getting people to chat, you're getting them to, especially if you're doing an interactive event, you don't want to lose the first 20 minutes as they start to realize they can ask questions, and so, that's a big piece of that puzzle. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I thought I was going to make a very dramatic entry with my graphic clock and then start on the hour. I think that's a bad idea based on what you just said.
It's not the best idea, but it's not a bad. Obviously, I made a whole bunch of those countdown clocks. That's what you can do it, but the best way to do it is exactly what you're talking about, is some kind of conversation. And it might even be better to have a conversation maybe somewhere else in the room. It doesn't have to be with the main cameras. So you're cut away and you're talking to everybody and you're asking them where they're coming from, and you're setting up stuff. You're doing housekeeping. You're doing all those other things, and then you cut to the camera. That can be your kind of your reveal as you cut to the kitchen. For that, so that it does take you somewhere else.
Alex, this has been invaluable in terms of thinking. I mean, you only think you're doing this in terms of just before the show. I hate to think about the planning before that and the detail you need to apply, where everything is ready for the show. Awesome. Awesome.
You know, I'll just keep on saying the one of my favorite quotes is from Omar Bradley that says, you know, is that amateurs talk about strategy, professionals talk about logistics. You know, and live streaming is a logistical game. And just always remember that it's all about logistics, you know, and logistics long before the event, logistics right before the event, but it's more about logistics than it is creativity. It's more about logistics than it is interactivity. It's all about, you know, it's about thinking about all those things. And the only way to do it is to do it, you know, and to be around people that know it and have these discussions so that you can think about those things before you do it. Go ahead, Stephen.
And also, since you're talking about logistics, when you load in, that's part of your show to the client. If you load in, dump everything out, and you look like a clown, guess who doesn't get called? But if you walk in, you know what's in every box, you're purposeful, they know they hired the right person, and they could still be nervous. And you look like the pro because you packed everything in order.
And we'll talk
I
about
know
load-ins,
Alex
but
does that too.
yeah, I'm obsessive. So we build everything and test it all in its current state in road cases at the office, and then we load in and then just plug them in. It's not, I don't like to, but I was never that kid. I was always the kid that didn't show his work and would get bad grades because I wouldn't show my calculations and stuff like that. I just don't like showing my work. And next question.
Well, we're finally to the second part of Ranjan's, which is, by the way, is there a universal cue sheet format you enjoy? We have experimented and used many different versions, but each department's cue sheet expectations on set can be different depending on which vendor the client may require us to use.
No, they're all different. Like I can't say that I see we different, and it depends if we're running it versus, I don't know if I don't have one available really quickly, but I don't know if I have one that I can show you, but the, we'll talk about cue sheets at some point. But we don't, every company seems to do it slightly differently. You know, like I haven't seen a standardization of that. We've thought about trying to standardize it, but in our own systems, we had it pretty well standard, but or we've had it pretty well standardized in Google Docs. But Rundown Creator is pretty cool. Like we always look at it like, oh, that'd be really cool, but we just don't know it well enough to, when it gets added, we're like, this is cool. But when we start using it, we're like, we're just gonna go back to Google Docs. So that's the hard part, is getting over what you already know how to do. Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago says, speaking of pricing, how do you explain to clients that they're paying for all the prep time and that the actual event is just the punchline?
I mean, I mean, you're bidding out number of days of load in, number of days of, you know, the pre-prep, the 4 hours before, hopefully in a regular event is going to be part of a day rate. You know, we don't do hourly, we do day rates. So it's costing them 10 hours no matter what, or 8 hours, depending on what the day is. It's a 10-hour day or 8-hour day. So if it's a 2-hour event, us showing up 4 hours before and then having enough time to load out is still inside of our day. So, so we, you know, we don't usually have to describe the couple hours. You know, usually we push for, we really think we should load in the day before, 2 days before. It just depends. And most of the clients that I work with already are used to that. They're not used to people loading in the same day. The only people that want you to load in the same day or don't want to pay for all that are people who haven't done it. Once they've done it a couple times, they want you to come in the day before. You know, like it's, and part of it is trying to educate them on that. But you can always tell if someone wants you to load in the same day or 2 hours before their event, you just know that they don't do this very often. You know, so they're newbies and they'll learn. You know, there's not any good way to do that all the time and be reliable. You know, there's just, you know, people getting in. If you have a broadcast truck, you can get in 6 hours before and have it running for a basketball game, but you're doing the same thing every single time with exactly the same requirements, with the exact same, whatever that it is, self-contained into known systems. But going in a bespoke event, you just need more time, you know? And so that's and you just, a lot of times there'll be an email from me that just says, I highly recommend against this. This is and I'll turn down most jobs that have, if they don't have some way to prep it, I just turn it down because it doesn't put me in a position to succeed. And I just, you know, I'm resistant to failure. so I don't, you know, if they're going to fail, I'd rather have them. And I've given up a bunch of shows where I'll tell them this isn't going to work. Then they go hire someone that's costs less and is less trouble and, you know, all this other stuff. And then they roll the 737 across the asphalt. and then they're much nicer afterwards. And then they come back and they're much more pliable. So because they now listening, because they got to fail in front of their bosses or in front of the public or whatever. Now they realize that this is, because there's nothing worse than a live event going sideways. It's just like your arm being slowly twisted off by a crank, but nothing's happening quickly, and it just hurts and hurts and hurts until it's done. So it's a truly painful experience, and it's why we spend so much time prepping. Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Just define bespoke for me. I even Googled it, and
bespoke is kind of a industry term for, it's not something you're doing all the time. You're designing something only for
Unique.
that. It's a unique build, and mostly what I specialize in is bespoke events. So I don't do a lot of events other than this one that we do every day, and even this one changes a little bit, ongoingly. But I don't do bespoke events. I mean, all I do is bespoke events, which I don't do something I'm gonna do over and over and over again. Or if I do, we hand it off to somebody else after the first 2 or 3. Like I'm in there and I go, figure it all out, and then I hand it off to capable hands and go do something else. So I'm really, because I'm more of an event designer. So that's what bespoke is. And so that's why it's hard and why we need so much time. Go ahead, next question.
I think bespoke comes out of British tailoring, where the suit is made for you, nobody else, just you. Ranjan's back with what is the day of show crew hierarchy to maintain sanity of the crew and client happiness? He's hired stage managers and found this to be the beginning of reaching show day nirvana.
Stage managers are key. Stage managers, producers, directors, all of them knowing each other. The more you can work with the same people over and over again, you get into a groove, and so that's why networking and, I just very rarely hire anybody on a crew call or whatever. I'm always asking people, who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you like to work with? So I'll ask, I have the shoots that we just did recently. I asked my brother wasn't available. He's really good. And I said, who else? And he gave me a DP. And then I asked the DP, what gaffer do you like to work with? He gave me a gaffer, and because I know that the two of them, that takes so much pressure off of me, because they're not arguing and bickering and talking about it. They work together all the time. It's just going to work, and so, and so you want to try to build a team that knows each other. That's part of it, and do enough events that you get to know each other, or and it's hard because you just have to find new people at times, but the new people, keep track of them. If they're good, keep them. If they're not, don't. And we'll talk about that. That's the whole nature of that process as a producer, is you're constantly evaluating people. We try to keep the client only talking to the producer, maybe the stage manager. Clients that talk to the rest of your crew is dangerous, because the rest of your crew will say yes to things that you can't do, or they'll start trying to do something for the client, because they're just trying to be helpful, and it destabilizes your whole event and you didn't even know it was happening. So, we try to position the client where they sit and everything else, where it's just most comfortable to talk to the producer. And we try to keep our crew understanding that if the client asks for anything, go back to them. It's not so that we can stop them. It's just so that we understand where things are. We get bit often if we let the client talk directly to the crew. And it's just because we need to know what's going on, and the crew may not know all the other things that have to happen. Jake, and then George.
Yeah, just quickly, in my experience, just having a shorthand is such a difference when you've got that, which typically is just going to come from having worked together before. But how efficient things can be is just amplified so much by having a shorthand.
Yeah, absolutely. And just knowing what that person's going to do. When I'm working with Brian Maddox, I know what he's going to do with the audio. I know it's handled. I know that he's going to figure out a whole bunch of things, and it's just all going to go away. And same with, Kevin Maurer and Kevin Hansen, all these guys that I work with every day. I just know that it's just going to go away in that space. I just hand them the thing and it's going to happen. All right, next question.
George Kennedy,
really quickly now.
From the panel here, can we chat a little about when 4 production companies are involved in a single event?
I mean, a lot of it's just meetings and coordination. And you have to understand who the client is paying the most attention to, because that's all that really matters. It won't matter whether it's you or not. If most traditional event groups within a company are only paying attention to their event team, the event company that's putting together the stage and everything else. And so, then you work with them. You don't try to. Great way to have things not go well is to try to work with the client directly outside of their event company. Event company will take that personally. and be frustrated with you. And so you want to, you got to figure out where you are in the food chain, which is generally important in most productions in all of life. And but people who think that they're a shark and they're actually a dolphin get themselves into a lot of trouble. You want to you want to know where you are in that food chain as it relates to the client, and then you want to work inside of where you belong in that process, and understand that you may not be able to fix everything. Go ahead, George.
So I asked this question specifically. My gig next week, I'm actually working for someone else as part of the production. So I'm just doing the live stream. I'm the last, I guess, wall to the web. So I've been watching all the email traffic. A lot of it doesn't pertain to me, but and I don't want to stick myself into something like you just said. You want to make sure that you stay kind of on focus on what your part of it is, And I have my client kind of tell me, well, you need to be able to stand by to help the guys out with WebEx. Well, I'm like, no, my job is to stream to Vimeo. I mean, I'm going to focus on the whole show, yes, and I want to know what's going on the other side, and I will, but I'm not going to interject myself into somebody else's space,
Yeah.
So I guess we need to be aware of that when we're doing jobs also is, what your position is. Don't offend anyone when you get on show site. I mean, I know most of the folks in DC, but you still need to be able to walk that line.
Yeah, the technical term is staying in your lane. Stay in your lane, and because you just don't know all the bits and pieces, and when you step out there, you're now accountable for it, or you're accountable for not working because you put your finger into it. As soon as you touch that other thing, the thing that I also try to explain to people, and this is a bigger conversation that I'll just say real quickly and move on, is everybody. If you're working with a bunch of other companies, just remember that everybody's friendly, but nobody is your friend. And so when you ask for a marker, you are putting yourself closer to the front of the bus if something goes wrong. When you ask for an extra cable, like I get furious with folks on my team who start asking other teams for things. You ask me for it, I'll run out to Best Buy and buy it, or I'll order it, or I'll send out whatever before I'll ask a team next to me for that gear, because they'll tell, if something goes wrong and they're trying to get out of it, they're going to tell the client that you weren't ready, and this is all the stuff that you asked for, and this is a long laundry list of what that is. And so you just have to be very, very careful of being self-contained. Now, on the other side of that, anybody asks me for something, I'm happy to give it to them, and I don't hold it against them because I'm making friends. So I don't take that in the same way, but you want to help everybody else because you want the event to go well. And if it's not going to extend me, I'll do it. And I always come with like 5 extra of everything. So it's, something that we do, but you don't let your team do that. Anyway, next question.
Vincent Alvarez says, Alex, many years ago, you talked about a 5-ish levels of backup, primary, alternative, backup, emergency, and last resort. What was the acronym?
PACE. I didn't make it up. It's a SEAL term. It's primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. Those are the four ways out, and so for an exfil. And so anyway, and a variety of other things. And so anyway, that's in another life, I was somewhat trained. So anyway, I've carried that approach on from a lot of things. Anyway, next question.
Tim Corbin, what tool do you use for your show rundown run of show? Note, it seems like it's being answered via Rajan's question. So Google Docs?
Google Docs.
All right,
Google Docs
moving on.
Is what we're using. Yep.
Dr. Ken Cass, follow up. What graphs are you monitoring on Meraki for live? Uplink, speed, packet loss, or something else?
I think we get all of those in one. I don't have it right in front of me. I don't have my Meraki here, but I don't have it open. But it's a graph that shows mostly the bandwidth, the up and down. There's a graph in the appliance readout that is showing me. It's just showing me a graph of what that is, and it has packet loss on the bottom of it. So those are the graphs that I'm looking at there. Next question.
And the final one in the queue, Chris Sanders from Bath in the UK says, how much of this great input on setting up can be translated to education? One for tomorrow, maybe? Do you want to address it, or
as much as you have capacity to do? I mean, I think the hard part is that education doesn't have a big team. Oftentimes, it doesn't have, the infrastructure, and teachers have to kind of just come in and do it. And so I think that can be a little bit more. A little bit more stressful. It just depends on how many. I think teachers are being, right now, the nature of how people are putting things together for teachers is not setting them up for success. With the amount of support that they have, the amount of time that they have, the amount of bunch of little events, these 50-minute by the bell silliness that they do, which wasn't great when they did it. Anyway, so I think that that's the hard part in trying to do it by themselves. Go ahead, Roscoe.
I was just going to say, oftentimes that's where your husband or wife or son comes in. They are your team, and you rally them around. I mean, personally in education, we have huge productions. We put on full-scale musicals and stuff, so we do all this planning. But that's specific to me. The average teacher in the classroom needs all those other people around them, and hopefully some good tech support on campus too.
And you'll notice, like, you know, there's a lot of pre-pro that we do, even with our own systems. We got a lot of you have jumped in and helped us days before an event for us to test some new thing or to put things out and everything else. When people say, "Oh, I just couldn't get my system together an hour before the event," and I've done that here a couple of times on a Saturday, but in general, you know, that's not. I don't even consider it acceptable. so it's something that you want to. Try to be testing again. Day before is what you're really trying to look for, because you just never know what's going to happen. Last question. We got one more that rolled in.
What do you instruct your crew to say when they can't talk to the client so they don't appear rude to the client?
It's not that they can't talk to them. It's just mostly asking them to say, I need to ask, you know, Alex, or I need to ask, you know, whatever. It's more of that. And generally I will find that it's, the client doesn't really want to talk to them most of the time. They are being chatty. Like, I just will say that generally, if the client's talking to them, they've opened up that door somewhere in the middle of it. Go ahead, Kev.
Yeah, I was just simply to say that all the crews I work with instinctively know, if they're on a shoot or a project, that if a question from a client or someone related to the client on the set is there, direct it to a producer or a PA, but not the director on the set, because chances are his mind is elsewhere at that point.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of, and we also kind of set up access of just where it is, and then we keep track of our clients. And so it's not like we're trying to keep the client in. We just want to know what's going on. And so a lot of times we're, you know, if we see the client over there talking to somebody, we wander over and just say, hey, you know, and just start answering questions. And the clients very quickly, again, it's not good for them either, you know, to be asking for all these things. And I always take it as I'm not giving the client enough information on my own. I'm not doing my job well enough if they feel like they need to go over and talk to those folks, you know. And so it's not anybody's fault other than my own. Is if the client doesn't feel like they're getting the information, they're going to go handle it because they're worried about their show. And so I, you know, kind of work through it. And I apologize to everyone. I'm 90 seconds late for my first meeting. I hope that was useful for everybody on the pre-show.
Huge.
So Fridays, we're going to spend Fridays talking about events. So we'll have different aspects of events and other things like that. This is just the first one of us just kind of playing with it. And we'll just talk through those things. So thank you all for sticking around and chatting. So, and I will see you all tomorrow. Remember, tomorrow is education, and I look forward to that conversation. Have a great day.
Hit it, Mickey.